So in this first video, I'm going to walk you through creating kind of a hello world app in Visual Studio using C# and XAML. So a little hello for Windows Phone app. And this video assumes that you've already gone through the software installation section of Lesson 1. So you have at least Windows 8.1 on your computer with a minimum of Visual Studio 2013 Professional. And you've also installed the Windows Phone emulation pack and all of the software that we need for writing these apps. So we're going to start with a new project. And make sure you're under Visual Studio, or I'm sorry, under Visual C#. You'll see Store Apps, and here's our three different types of apps: Universal Apps, Windows Apps, and Windows Phone Apps. And really the difference here is Windows Phone apps are designed only for phone, right? It says a project for a single page Windows Phone uses the Windows runtime. If we look at Windows apps, these are more for like the Surface tablet, the Surface laptop computer, right? No predefined controls or layout. Universal apps is really where Microsoft is trying to go with development, where universal apps will be able to run on any Windows 10 computer. Well, right now they'll run on 8.1, but the idea is we make a universal app, we code it once, so it'll run on your Windows 10 desktop, it'll run on your Windows Surface, it'll run on your Windows Phone. It's truly a universal app idea. But we're going to start with a Windows Phone app and go ahead and give it a name. I'm going to call it Hello World App. Right, and we want a blank Windows Phone app. You can see there's a bunch of different templates in here for different types of apps. We'll get into some of these in this class, but we're just going to do a blank app for right now. So go ahead and create that, and it'll take it just a second to get that set up. So where it initially drops you is into the app.xaml, right? So we can see that in the app.xaml.cs. Now in Windows applications, there are three layers in the app. There is the GUI presentation, right? So where our actual controls reside, what the user sees, buttons, text boxes, that kind of thing, the GUI layer. There's the intermediate layer that lays in between the UI and our code, which is the C# code that we're used to seeing that we're looking at right here. And that intermediate layer is called XAML, and it's a XML-based presentation language. So if we come over here to our Solution Explorer and take a look at the files that we have in this project, we can see we got two different XAML pages in here. The app.xaml controls app things, so kind of behind the scenes things needed for your application. The main page.xaml is where the actual magic takes place. So I'm going to close the app one and I'm going to open the main page one. And depending on your Visual Studio setup and your layout, you can move these windows around. But you can see it's going to give us that presentation layer and a nice little emulation phone looking window. Now let me get rid of this for some space. And then this is our XAML over here. And as you can see, it kind of looks like HTML because it's based on like an XML format. But it tells the phone, the device, how to display the controls needed so that as maybe the screen size changes between devices or as the user rotates the screen, that information can update and change accordingly. So as we add controls onto the screen, our XAML will update automatically, but we can also come into our XAML and make changes if needed. To see the C#, the code behind, we can come up to View and Code, and that'll take us into our XAML.cs file, which shows us this is all of our C# code behind here, and it gives you some initial setup things needed to run the application. So to get started, since it's just a little Hello World app, all right, we're just going to learn about some of the basic Toolbox controls. So if you come over here to the Toolbox and open that up, you can see that there's a lot of different controls, and we get pretty much the same interface that we are used to using with Windows Forms applications. So the control we want to start with is called a text block. And a text block is similar to a label in your Windows Form application. It allows us to just place text somewhere on the screen. And so as you can see, as I'm messing with this, the XAML over here is updating automatically. So as I I play around with these controls as I give it a name and things, it'll change. So similarly, we come over to the properties window, and this is where I can give it a name. All right, so I'm going to name this text block 1. I can give it the text. What do I want it to say? I'm going to say hello CIS 295. And you'll notice as that changes, and it'll update over here in the visual part of the display. I can also come into some of these sections down in here and change, how big do I want it? Well, I want it pretty big, so let's make it 48. And you can, as you're messing around in here, if it's not enough space, you can dock these things in, you can move these panes in and out. If you have dual monitors, this is really where this comes in handy, because you can actually pull these various tabs off into separate monitors and get a larger view. So let's see, layout, we can make it stretch the entire width here. Oh, that's horizontal alignment. Okay. So we want an auto. If we just type auto in there, it'll give us an auto height and an auto width. So that way it'll auto update. So if the phone screen size changes or they rotate it or something like that, that'll update that automatically. And so we're stretching that all the way across so it'll fill the entire top of the screen. So right now our screen looks like this, just hello CIS 295. Now what I also want to show you how to do is how to put a picture onto your screen. And I just went to Google and I grabbed a picture of a flower because it's kind of springy, summery. So I got this picture of a flower and I put it on my desktop. You can get a picture of whatever you like. Remember to keep it tasteful, right? And so we'll come up to our Solution Explorer and come into our Assets section. Now, Microsoft provides you with some templates for making logos, splash screens, things like that. Templates for creating these. Right now they don't look like anything. You can put your mouse over them and you can see they just look like blank squares. We're going to add our picture into the assets so that we can then use it in our app. So we right click and we add an existing item. And then here I am on my desktop and here's the picture of a flower. And I'm going to add that in. So now I see that under the Assets section in my Solution Explorer. So once you have your picture uploaded and it's in your assets, we're going to come over and we're going to find the image tool in our toolbox and place that onto your phone canvas here, and you can make it as big as you need it to make it so that it shows your picture. Over in the properties section of your image, under the common section, the source is where you tell it what picture to use, and it's automatically going to populate this drop-down box with everything that's in the assets folder. So I'm going to choose my flower, and there it is. Now I can see my flower. I can resize this and make sure that my flower fits, and there it is. So that's what my app looks like right now. So you can go ahead and build, make sure you don't have anything funky going on, that the build actually works correctly. And then you'll want to run it and test it in the emulation environment. Now up here into the run section, this is where you can choose which emulator that you want to use. And I recommend this 8.1 with 512 meg space, simply because it runs a little bit faster. You're welcome to play around with these different emulators to see how your app works on different size screens. There's of course other emulators you can get if you want to try out some other kind of odd phone sizes. Of course, if you were using some different app types, like if you were building a Windows Store app, then some of your emulation devices would also be for the Surface and the different screen sizes that you would get for the Surface. And then, of course, for Universal, you can test it at various resolutions that you might see on a desktop. So the first time you do this and you run, you pick your emulator and you run, what's happening in the background is it's going to load up this little emulation screen that you see here. It looks like a nice little Windows phone, has a control palette over here on the side, and it's actually loading up a virtualized instance of Windows Phone. Now, I have a little problem with this. If you get this, sometimes you just have to switch emulation devices. I'm going to show you how to troubleshoot the Hyper-V environment, which is what runs this, in a later lesson. But don't get discouraged. It happens to me too. I usually just switch up emulators and try again. Now, if it's your first time running the emulator, it's going to take quite a bit of time It's typically not hung, so if you're not getting an error message, don't worry, let it sit. Uh, what it's doing is basically building an emulation profile in the background with that Hyper-V manager that I talked about earlier. So you got to just be patient. On some systems, this can take upwards of 10 minutes. And it won't always be this slow. It's only the first time. So just be patient with it. Let it sit there and do what it's doing. And then eventually you'll get an error, which is something we can troubleshoot, or it will load your app and you'll be able to view it. So this is the part that's kind of hard the first time. Once the editor or emulator, I'm sorry, is up and running, it will go ahead and load your app. And so we can see here that our app just displays Hello CIS 295 in the lovely picture, just like we saw here over in the GUI window of Visual Studio. Over here on the side, you can rotate the phone and see what it will look like. Since we've got everything set to auto, it should just auto place all of those items. Later, when we have different audio elements and things, you can adjust the audio on the phone over here. You can go back to the start menu and play around in the emulator and see what the phone is like. And then when you're done messing around in the emulator, and later when we have apps that we can actually test, you'll test them, make sure they're running properly. Just go ahead and close the emulator and it will take you back to Visual Studio. And that concludes this section of the lesson, and you have now created your first Windows Phone application.